It's 1565. Miguel Lopez de Legazpi arrives to the Philippines with 5 ships and 500 men determined to found a colony. There were many expeditions with the same desire before, the largest one arriving in 1541, but all these have failed. Legazpi sets up his headquarters on the island of Cebu, expanding from there mainly through diplomacy. The northern islands easily adopt Christianity, however the Spanish soon find themselves at odds with the Muslim south. In 1571, Legazpi goes to war with the Sultanate of Brunei, who are backed by the Ottomans. The Spanish achieve a Pyrrhic victory and as a result occupy Manila, setting up their new capital there. The Christian north is now firmly in Spanish hands, however insurgency in the Muslim south continues until the 19th century. Chinese and Japanese pirates also give the Spanish a hard time. Due to logistics, most of the settlers arrive from Mexico. Getting there is easy, following the southern currents that flow due west. In 1565, an easy way of getting back is found, following the eastward currents in the north. Trade flourishes with silver from America being exchanged for Indonesian spices and silk and porcelain from China. Every year the Manila galleon departs and slowly makes its way to the coast of California. From here it sails south to Acapulco. From there the cargo is transported overland by mule train to Veracruz. Here the silver mined in Mexico is added. The silver from Peru arrives by ship from Lima, then it's usually carried over the Isthmus of Panama. From here the cargoes are shipped to Cuba or Hispaniola, where sugar, the main cash crop of the Caribbean, is added. When a sufficient number of ships assemble, a treasure fleet is dispatched under heavy guard. In return, Spain sends manufactured goods, as well as wine and olives, growing which is illegal in the colonies. Slaves are brought by Portuguese ships and later by the Dutch and English, as Spain possesses no slave colonies in Africa. All inbound and outbound trade is controlled and taxed in Seville by the Casa de Contracción, which was established in 1503. All goods coming from the colonies have to come to Seville, and all ships going to the colonies have to depart from Seville. In the beginning, all foreign ships are excluded, and trade is conducted within a closed system. The central administration of the colonies is conducted by the Council of the Indies. The Council of the Indies was initially established as a traveling court, then after the partition of Charles V's empire, it became a permanent establishment in Madrid. The empire was divided into 2 viceroyalties, the Viceroyalty of New Spain, centered on Mexico, which includes Central America, the Caribbean, Venezuela and the Philippines, and the Viceroyalty of Peru, that integrates most of Spanish South America. The economic and social order is based on the encomienda. In this system, landlords, usually conquistadors and their descendants, are granted land and a number of Indian villages. These villages are obliged to provide a certain number of men to work on the lord's fields or in the lord's mines. Otherwise, the natives are left alone to govern themselves as they wish, as the landlords mostly live separate in and around the cities. This setup is not unfamiliar to the Indians. From their perspective, tyrannical native elites who extracted tribute have been replaced by a foreign elite likewise interested in extracting tribute. They find an ally in the Catholic Church, with early advocates such as Bartolomé de las Casas condemning their enslavement. As a reaction to this, the Emperor and later Philip II issue laws against the enslavement of the Indians. In America, however, he who owns the land makes the laws, so it will take many years until the natives are given a fair wage for their labor. After wars, epidemics and enslavement have decimated their numbers, it takes a full century until their population begins to recover. However, by this time, 250,000 Europeans are already in the colonies. Most of them are young men, so through intermarriage, the majority of the people in the Spanish Americas will be of mixed race. Spain had to figure out how to govern vast amounts of territory in an age when communication with the furthest reaches of the empire often took more than a year. Spain achieved this by way of a sophisticated bureaucracy that almost ran itself. Branches of the government are separated and top positions are usually filled by Castilians from Spain, people the locals call peninsulares. This minimizes corruption and ensures that the state's interests won't be subverted by local elites. Laws are not always carried out to the fullest, but they are also rarely opposed. There are sporadic clashes with the Indians, however these never threaten the empire itself. The economy flourishes, and all in all we can say that the Spanish Empire is very well run for the day. Indeed, by the reign of Philip II, the American colonies provide 1/5 of the royal revenue. Charles V's expedition to Tunis is financed by the Inca treasure, and later the silver mines provide an even larger hoard. If it wasn't for Europe and its age-old feuds, Spain and the empire would have prospered. But it wasn't to be so. Even in the time of Charles, expenses far outweighed incomes. The Habsburg Emperor had to simultaneously fight the French in Italy, the Ottomans in Hungary and the Mediterranean, and the Protestants in Germany. To make up for shortfalls in the state budget, Charles became heavily indebted to German and Genoese bankers. The first default on debt occurs in 1547, 1 year after he steps down and partitions his empire. Although his son Philip II is rid of the Italian wars, he still has to deal with the Ottomans in the Mediterranean and an even more formidable enemy, the Calvinist Dutch rebels. To make his problems worse, Philip gets involved in France's civil war. This triggers England's Protestant queen, Elizabeth I, to go to war with Spain. As a result, her privateers are unleashed on the Spanish treasure fleets. These privateers usually circle like sharks off the coast of Portugal, waiting for an opportunity. The most daring attacks are made by Francis Drake. In 1578, he goes where no Englishman had gone before and captures a treasure ship heading to Panama. Then Drake proceeds to complete the second circumnavigation of the world. Later, in 1585, at the head of a large fleet, Drake ransacks the Caribbean. In 1587, he attacks the treasure fleet near Cadiz. Then finally, in 1595, he orchestrates a second invasion of the Caribbean, leaving destruction in his wake. Meanwhile, in 1578, Portugal's king dies without an heir. Philip seizes at the opportunity and annexes Portugal together with its massive maritime empire. This union proves disastrous for both countries. Portugal had been at peace with both England and the Dutch. Now they are at war. This is very convenient for the Dutch and the English, as they are already planning to set up their own competing empires in India and the Moluccas. By the early 1600s, attacks on Portuguese possessions are becoming endemic. As the senior member of the Iberian Union, Spain has the duty to protect Portugal. This further drains the treasury, even though revenues from the colonies keep increasing. With all the silver coming in from the Americas, an inflationary period turns even worse. More money is chasing the same amount of product, so product becomes more expensive. State bankruptcy soon becomes the routine in Spain. In 1621, Philip IV ascends the throne. He proves to be weak-willed and uninvolved, so his chief minister, the Count Duke of Olivares, takes over the governance of the country. Olivares keenly points out that Spain's greatest problem are the Dutch rebels. Therefore, in 1521, Spain becomes involved in a 30 Years' War on the side of the Austrian Habsburgs. The Catholic cause almost prevails, but in the end the war has to be resolved by negotiation. Spain is bankrupt again, as France becomes the dominant power in Europe. Olivares attempts to raise more funds, but in 1640 Catalonia revolts, followed by Portugal. Portugal manages to break away and concludes peace with England, and eventually the Dutch. This frees Spain from much responsibility, but by the mid-17th century its economy is already on its last legs. After Olivares failed to extract higher taxes from the different provinces, the burden falls on the core of Spain and the Spanish Empire, Castile. Taxes are raised and coinage is debased. As a result, state incomes decline and more bankruptcy follows. By the end of the 17th century, bankers own everything in Spain, and Castile is nearly depopulated. This period is also marked by the worst Spanish king, Charles II. Charles is the product of cousin marriage between Spanish and Austrian Habsburgs. He is feeble-minded and in weak health. Since the day of his birth, courtiers have been waiting for him to die. Charles finally dies in 1700, leaving behind no heir. The main contenders to the throne are the Bourbons of France and the Habsburgs of Austria. The War of the Spanish Succession erupts in 1701 and lasts until 1714. France manages to prevail against a coalition of Austria, England and the Dutch, but the Spanish Bourbons have to agree to keep Spain separate from France. The Bourbons gradually start to reform the country, however by this time Spain is already a second-rate power. Spain becomes inactive in Europe and defensive in its colonies. During the 17th century, rival naval powers had gained a firm foothold in the Caribbean. England conquers Jamaica in 1655, the Dutch established themselves in Curaçao, and the French acquire half of Hispaniola in 1697. The Spanish Empire's closed economic system is increasingly untenable now. Smuggling reaches endemic proportions, depriving the treasury of funds. The Dutch, and particularly the British, can provide much cheaper European goods, making the colonists interested in cheating Spain. Charles III, Spain's enlightened monarch, attempts to remedy this with reforms. He introduces 2 new viceroyalties in an attempt to make the empire more governable. He also excludes American elites from top positions in an attempt to reduce corruption. In Spain, he encourages industry and adopts a mercantilist financial policy. But in spite of all his efforts, the closed economic system of the empire cannot be maintained. Motivated by economic interests, Britain makes repeated attacks on Spanish America. In 1739, the so-called War of Jenkins erupts between Spain and Britain. The British capture Portobello and launch 3 very ample but in the end unsuccessful sieges against Cartagena. Spain enters the 7 Years' War on France's side, sparking the Anglo-Spanish War of 1762. As a result, the British launch another unsuccessful attempt against Cartagena. However, they do manage to capture Havana, Florida, and Manila. Havana and Manila are given back, but the British get to keep Florida. Since France was ousted from North America, the sparsely populated Louisiana territory is ceded to Spain. Siding against Britain in the American War of Independence, Spain manages to recover Florida. This is the period when the numerous star forts are built on the coast of America. After this turbulent period, a few calm decades follow. However, by this time, more and more colonial elites are talking about independence. This is the state in which the outbreak of the French Revolution finds Spanish America. Spain is forced into an alliance with France. Then in 1808, Napoleon invades the peninsula. The legitimate king is deposed, and Joseph Bonaparte, the emperor's brother, is installed as a puppet king. In 1809, independent governing councils are formed in many colonies. Initially, these are merely meant to be governing the provinces in the king's name, where Spain is under foreign occupation. However, with time, pro-independence forces start to gain the upper hand. In 1814, the legitimate king Ferdinand VII is restored. Ferdinand intends to reimpose everything to how it was before Napoleon. This is unacceptable for the colonials, who would like proportional representation in Spain's parliament and the liberal constitution of 1812 to remain in force. Ferdinand refuses to grant any concessions, so the colonies break out in open rebellion. Spain dispatches several expeditions against the rebels, but these become spread out far and wide, eventually being defeated in detail. As José de San Martín advances from the south, Simón Bolívar moves against the loyalists from the north. Agustín de Iturbide, the leader of the pro-independence movement in Mexico, first tries to negotiate. When this fails, he clears the loyalists from Central America. Only the Caribbean and the Philippines remain loyal to Spain. Half of Florida is lost to the United States in 1810, the other half is sold in 1821 as part of the Adams-Onis Treaty. The Louisiana Territory had already been taken by Napoleon in 1800 and then sold to the United States in the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Santo Domingo, the Spanish part of the island of Hispaniola, declares its independence in 1821, but the new state is quickly overrun by Haiti. Thus, Spain recolonizes it, but the growing insurgency means they have to abandon the island in 1865. In 1898, the Spanish-American War breaks out, with disastrous consequences for Spain. Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines are lost to the United States. Spain plays a modest role in the scramble for Africa, acquiring the territory called the Spanish Sahara and a small claim along the equator. Little investment is made in these colonies, as Spain struggles with internal conflict. Equatorial Guinea gains independence in 1968. After Morocco becomes independent, it lays claim to the Spanish Sahara. In 1975, Spain is finally forced to abandon it due to an increasing insurgency, with Morocco occupying the territory. By the end of the 20th century, only the Canary Islands and a few enclaves on the North African coast remain of the former possessions. Thus came and went the Spanish Empire.